The fluorescent lights of St. Mary's General Hospital emergency room buzzed with the same relentless frequency as the heart monitor beside bed 7. Sarah Martinez had been staring at that monitor for the past 20 minutes, watching the irregular rhythm of a woman who was about to die because of numbers on a computer screen. It was 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in Phoenix, Arizona. Sarah's 13th hour of her shift. Her feet ached in shoes that cost more than she could afford, and her lower back screamed from bending over patients who couldn't pay for the care they desperately needed. But none of that mattered now, because Maria Santos was clutching her chest and speaking in broken English about fire inside her heart. "Please, doctora," Maria whispered, her weathered hands shaking as she tried to sit up on the gurney. "The pain, es como fuego, like fire." Sarah wasn't a doctor. She was a nurse who'd been fighting the healthcare system for 8 years, one patient at a time, one insurance denial at a time, one heartbreak at a time. And right now, she was losing. The computer screen showed the insurance denial for the 3rd time this shift. Claim rejected. Medication not covered under current plan. Patient responsibility. 847. The words might as well have been a death sentence. Maria's daughter Carmen, 19 years old, with worry lines that made her look 30, counted crumpled bills and food stamps for the 5th time. $23. That was it. $23 between her grandmother and a heart attack that would kill her within the week. "I don't understand," Carmen said, tears streaming down her face. "The doctor said she needs this medicine or she'll die. How can they just say no?" Sarah had heard this question 1,000 times. She'd given the standard answer about insurance protocols, prior authorizations, and appeals processes. She'd watched patients die while waiting for bureaucrats to decide if their lives were worth the cost of medication. Tonight, something inside her snapped. She looked at her own bank account on her phone. 891.47. After rent, 1,450. Student loans, 847 monthly. Her own mother's memory care facility, 3,200. And groceries that consisted mainly of ramen noodles and hope, she had 891.47 to her name. The medication cost $847. Sarah Martinez made the decision that would destroy her life and save it simultaneously in exactly 12 seconds. "I'll handle this," she told Carmen, walking toward the hospital pharmacy window with steps that felt like she was walking toward a cliff. Each footfall echoed in her mind. "This will get you fired. This will ruin your career. This violates 17 different hospital policies." Tom Nguyen, the night pharmacist, looked up from his computer as Sarah approached. He'd worked with her for 3 years, had seen her stay late to comfort dying patients, had watched her use her own car to drive discharged patients home when they had no transportation. He knew what she was about to do before she said a word. "Sarah," Tom whispered, glancing around to make sure no supervisors were within earshot. "You know they'll fire you if administration finds out. This is your 3rd time this month." She did know. She'd bought insulin for a diabetic patient 2 weeks ago when his insurance claimed his prescription was not medically necessary. She'd purchased an inhaler for an 8-year-old girl whose asthma attack sent her to the ER because her family couldn't afford her preventative medication. Each time, she'd told herself it was the last time. Each time, she'd been wrong. "Tom, that woman is going to have a heart attack if she doesn't get this medication tonight. Her insurance company has decided her life is worth less than 847. I'm deciding it's worth more." Sarah handed him her debit card with hands that shook slightly. The card reader seemed to take forever, each beep echoing like a countdown to her professional suicide. Beep, 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 beep. Approved. She signed the receipt, knowing she was signing away her financial security for the next month. Hell, probably the next 3 months. She'd eat ramen and hope again, just like nursing school, but Maria Santos would live. Walking back to bed, 7 felt like floating. Carmen looked up hopefully as Sarah approached with the small white bag containing a month's supply of heart medication that could prevent a potentially fatal cardiac event. "How much do I owe you?" Carmen asked, already reaching for her phone to call family members, neighbors, anyone who might loan them money. "Nothing," Sarah said, placing the medication in Maria's hands. "Just take care of your grandmother." Maria Santos looked at the medication, then at Sarah, then began speaking rapid Spanish through tears. Her words poured out like a prayer, like a blessing, like gratitude too deep for translation. She grabbed Sarah's hands and wouldn't let go, pressing them between her own weathered palms while continuing her stream of Spanish. Carmen translated, her own voice breaking. "She says you're an angel. She says God sent you to save her life. She says she's going to pray for you every day for the rest of her life, and she's going to tell everyone she meets about the angel nurse who saved her when the world said she should die. Sarah felt tears she didn't know she'd been holding back start to flow. In 8 years of nursing, she'd saved countless lives through medical procedures, emergency interventions, and clinical expertise. But this felt different. This felt like the reason she'd become a nurse in the first place. What Sarah didn't know was that Carmen, overwhelmed with gratitude and desperate to share this moment of humanity in an inhumane system, was recording the interaction on her phone. She didn't ask permission, she just hit record, because she needed the world to see what a real hero looked like. What Sarah didn't know was that Carmen, a social media native who'd grown up documenting every moment of her life online, would post that video to TikTok before leaving the hospital. The caption would read, "This nurse used her own money to save my grandmother's life when the system failed us. This is what angels look like." Caverda. What Sarah didn't know was that she had exactly 6 hours and 13 minutes before her quiet act of compassion would explode into a viral phenomenon that would change her life forever. At 6 a.m., as Sarah finally drove home in her 10-year-old Honda Civic, exhausted beyond measure, but feeling something like peace for the first time in months, the video had 50 views. By the time she fell asleep at 7:30 a.m., still in her scrubs because she was too tired to change, it had reached 200. By noon, when Sarah's phone started buzzing incessantly with notifications she was too tired to check, the video had 500 views and was climbing fast. The comments poured in like a digital avalanche. This is what heroes look like. Not all angels have wings. While billionaires spend money on space trips, this nurse saves actual lives. The system is broken. This woman is a saint. Someone needs to start a GoFundMe for this angel. I'm a nurse too, and this happens every single day. We're choosing between policies and patients constantly. This made me cry. How is this even legal? How can insurance companies just let people die? But other comments, buried deeper in the thread, carried a different tone that would prove prophetic. This is probably insurance fraud. Hospitals have policies for a reason. She violated protocol. What if that medication had killed the patient? Lawsuits much? Which hospital is this? We need to investigate these policy violations. Gooder nurses like this create liability nightmares for healthcare institutions. By evening news cycle, the video had 2.3 million views. Local Phoenix News picked it up first, then CNN, then Fox News, then every major network. The story that would lead every broadcast was simple and devastating. Nurse uses own salary to buy patient's medicine after insurance denial. Sarah's phone showed 47 missed calls when she finally woke up at 6 p.m., still groggy and confused about why her phone was vibrating every few seconds with notifications. The first call she returned was from her supervisor, Janet Morrison. Janet Morrison was everything Sarah hated about healthcare administration. A woman who'd never worked a bedside shift but made decisions about patient care from behind a desk. A woman who measured success in profit margins rather than lives saved. A woman whose idea of healthcare improvement was cutting nurse-to-patient ratios to save money. "Sarah," Janet's voice was ice cold. "We need to talk. Tomorrow morning. First thing. Do not discuss this situation with anyone else before we meet." Sarah's stomach dropped to somewhere around her knees. "Janet, I know what this is about, and I can explain tomorrow. First thing." The line went dead. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She scrolled through thousands of comments from strangers calling her a hero and hundreds more calling her a liability. Someone had started a GoFundMe that had already raised 15 for the angel nurse who paid for a patient's medication. Sarah hadn't asked for any of this attention. She just wanted to help Maria Santos live through the night. She thought about Maria, probably sleeping peacefully for the first time in weeks, with her heart medication working properly, regulating the rhythm that kept her alive. Sarah fell asleep clutching her phone, watching the view count climb past 3 million, completely unaware that across the city, several very important people in expensive suits were making urgent phone calls about her future. The last thing she remembered thinking before exhaustion finally claimed her was how quiet her apartment felt compared to the chaos exploding around her name on the internet. She had no idea that tomorrow would be the beginning of the fight of her life. Sarah Martinez had always believed in being early. 5 minutes early was on time was late, and late was unacceptable. It was a philosophy that had served her well through nursing school, through 8 years of hospital shifts, through every challenge her career had thrown at her. So when she walked into conference room B at exactly 7:55 a.m. for her 8:00 a.m. meeting, she expected to find Janet Morrison setting up papers or preparing coffee. Instead, she found herself facing a tribunal that looked like it had been designed to intimidate her into submission. Janet Morrison sat at the head of the long conference table like a judge preparing to deliver a death sentence. To her right sat Richard Blackstone, Saint Blackstone, Mary's chief legal counsel, a man whose expensive suit probably cost more than Sarah made in 2 months. To her left sat Dr. Marcus Webb, chief medical officer, whose clinical detachment made him look like he was examining a particularly uninteresting specimen under a microscope. The conference room smelled like fear and legal documents. Miss Martinez, Richard Blackstone began before Sarah had even fully seated herself, sliding a tablet across the table that showed Carmen's viral video frozen on Sarah's face as she handed Maria Santos the medication. You've created a significant legal liability for this institution. Sarah's mouth went dry. She'd prepared for a disciplinary meeting about policy violations. She hadn't prepared for what felt like a criminal interrogation. I helped a patient who needed medication to prevent a heart attack. I don't understand how that creates. You violated 17 different hospital policies, Janet Morrison interrupted, unfolding a printed document that looked like it had been prepared by a legal team. Her voice carried the satisfaction of someone who'd been waiting for this moment. Direct financial involvement with patients, circumventing established insurance protocols, creating unauthorized social media content, bringing negative media attention to hospital procedures, practicing medicine without proper oversight, and that's just the beginning. Sarah felt like she was sinking into quicksand. I didn't practice medicine. Dr. Richards prescribed the medication. I just purchased it when the patient couldn't afford. Without authorization, Dr. Webb interjected, leaning forward with clinical precision. Sarah, I've reviewed your employment file. You're a good nurse. Your patient satisfaction scores are consistently high, your clinical skills are excellent, and your colleagues respect you. But what you did sets a dangerous precedent that could destroy this hospital's ability to provide care to anyone. The words hit Sarah like physical blows. How does helping one patient destroy the hospital's ability to help others? Richard Blackstone opened a leather portfolio that probably cost more than Sarah's car. Let me explain the legal realities you've created, Miss Martinez. If every nurse in this hospital decides to personally finance patient medications, where does it end? Do we expect our staff to pay for surgeries, rent, car payments, groceries? At what point does personal financial involvement with patients become an unmanageable liability? Sarah's voice shook as she tried to defend herself. That woman could have died. Her insurance company denied medication that her doctor said was medically necessary. How is that not a system failure? And if she had died after taking medication you purchased? Blackstone's voice rose with prosecutorial intensity. This hospital would face massive wrongful death lawsuits. Did you consider that possibility, Miss Martinez? Did you think about the liability if that medication had caused an adverse reaction? If she had been allergic to something in the prescription? If there had been a drug interaction you weren't aware of? You're not her physician. You don't have the medical training to make those decisions. The meeting lasted 2 hours and 17 minutes. It felt like 17 years. Dr. Webb explained the medical liability issues with the detached precision of a pathologist performing an autopsy. Richard Blackstone outlined the legal ramifications with the enthusiasm of a prosecutor seeking the death penalty. Janet Morrison documented every word Sarah said as potential evidence of insubordination and policy violations. Sarah was placed on administrative leave pending a complete investigation. She had to surrender her hospital ID badge, her computer access cards, and her parking pass immediately. Security would escort her from the building to ensure she didn't access patient records or hospital systems during her suspension. The investigation will be thorough and impartial, Janet Morrison said with a tone that suggested it would be neither. We've already contacted the State Nursing Board, the Drug Enforcement Administration to investigate potential controlled substance violations, our malpractice insurance company, and our corporate legal team. This could affect your nursing license permanently, Miss Martinez. I hope you understand the seriousness of your actions. As Sarah was escorted through the hospital corridors she'd called home for 8 years, she saw the stares from colleagues who'd heard about the meeting. Some looked sympathetic, but afraid to show it. Others looked judgmental, as if her policy violations were a personal betrayal of their profession. A few looked angry, as if she'd brought unwanted attention to problems they'd all been quietly managing for years. The security guard escorting her was Danny Rodriguez, a man she'd joked with for 3 years about his daughter's soccer games and his wife's attempts to get him to eat more vegetables. Today, he wouldn't make eye contact. Today, he was just doing his job, moving a policy violator away from the patients she'd sworn to protect. In the parking lot, Sarah discovered that someone had tipped off the local news crews. Cameras rolled as she walked to her Honda Civic, carrying a cardboard box of personal items that represented 8 years of her professional life. A coffee mug her nephew had made in art class, photos of patients who'd recovered because of her care, and a small cactus that had somehow survived on her desk, despite her inability to keep anything alive outside of a hospital setting. Jessica Chen, from Channel 12 News, thrust a microphone towards Sarah's face as she fumbled with her car keys. "Sarah, do you regret helping that patient? Do you think you made the right choice?" Sarah stopped walking. She looked directly into the camera, knowing that whatever she said would be broadcast across Phoenix and potentially picked up by national networks. She thought about Maria Santos, probably taking her heart medication at this very moment, her cardiac rhythm steady and strong because a nurse had spent 847. "I regret that we live in a system where a healthcare worker has to choose between following policies and saving lives," she said. "I regret that insurance companies can sentence people to death for profit, while healthcare workers who try to prevent those deaths get investigated for policy violations." The clip played on every Phoenix news station that evening and was picked up by CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, and every major network by the following morning. Within 48 hours, Sarah's life had become a waking nightmare, orchestrated by institutional self-preservation and corporate damage control. The state nursing board opened a formal investigation into her pattern of patient financial involvement and potential violations of professional nursing standards. Hospital security began reviewing surveillance, footage from all of her previous shifts, looking for any other instances of suspicious activity or policy violations. Janet Morrison personally interviewed every nurse, doctor, and staff member who'd ever worked with Sarah, asking pointed questions about her professional judgment and adherence to institutional protocols. The Drug Enforcement Administration sent 2 agents to question Tom Nguyen about potential medication diversion and controlled substance violations. Even though the heart medication wasn't a controlled substance, they wanted to establish whether Sarah had a pattern of unauthorized pharmaceutical activity. Insurance investigators arrived at stliber.com, Marys with briefcases full of legal documents, examining every aspect of Sarah's employment to look for patterns of potential fraud or systematic policy circumvention. Tom Nguyen, under pressure from federal investigators and threats of pharmacy license suspension, revealed that Sarah had purchased patient medications twice before in the past 6 months. Once, she'd bought insulin for a diabetic patient whose insurance company claimed his prescribed dosage was excessive despite being ordered by his endocrinologist. Another time, she'd purchased an inhaler for an 8-year-old girl whose family couldn't afford the $180 cost after their insurance denied coverage for her specific brand of asthma medication. Each incident became ammunition for the investigation. Each act of compassion was reframed as evidence of systematic policy violations and a pattern of unauthorized financial involvement with patients that creates liability concerns for the institution. Sarah's colleagues were questioned individually in closed-door meetings that felt more like interrogations than employment discussions. Most supported her privately, but were terrified to speak publicly. The message from administration was clear: defend Sarah Martinez, and your own employment status might become questionable. The hospital's public relations team, led by corporate communications specialists who charged $400 per hour to protect institutional reputations, crafted a statement that was released to all major news outlets. While St. Mary's Hospital appreciates the compassion and dedication of all our employees, we maintain strict policies designed to protect both patients and staff from potential liability and safety issues. We are conducting a thorough investigation into policy violations by a former employee. Patient safety and institutional integrity are our highest priorities, and we cannot comment further on personnel matters while the investigation is ongoing. The wording was surgically precise and devastatingly effective. Former employee made Sarah sound like she'd been terminated for cause. Policy violations suggested professional misconduct without specifying what she'd actually done. Patient safety implied that Sarah's actions had somehow endangered people rather than saved a life. Conservative media outlets picked up the narrative of institutional responsibility. Rogue nurse violates hospital safety protocols, creates liability nightmare for healthcare institution. Liberal media defended her compassion. Hero nurse punished for putting patient care before corporate policies. Sarah Martinez, who'd never wanted to be political and had never considered herself an activist, became a polarizing figure in America's healthcare debate. She just wanted to help Maria Santos live through the night. Without her two $847 monthly nursing salary, Sarah faced immediate and crushing financial pressure. Her mother's memory care facility required three $200 monthly payment, due in 12 days. Her student loan payment of $847 was due in 8 days. Her rent of $450 was due in 6 days. The GoFundMe established by strangers had reached 47,000, but lawyers advised her not to touch the money. Using donations intended for her defense could be seen as profiting from policy violations and might provide ammunition for prosecutors who were already looking for evidence of systematic fraud. Sarah's 81-year-old mother called from the memory care facility, confused and frightened by the news coverage she didn't fully understand. "Mija, why are you on the television? Did you do something wrong? The nurses here are asking me questions about you, and I don't understand what happened." Sarah's 8-year-old nephew asked his mother, Sarah's sister, "Why is everyone saying Aunt Sarah is a bad person now? I thought she helped sick people get better." The stress manifested in physical symptoms that would have concerned Sarah if she'd been treating another patient. She couldn't eat, food felt like cardboard, and made her nauseous. She couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Janet Morrison's satisfied expression or Richard Blackstone's prosecutorial glare. Stress-induced eczema broke out on her hands, the irony not lost on her that she was too anxious to afford healthcare while fighting for others' right to healthcare. Behind closed doors, in conference rooms and legal offices across Phoenix and beyond, powerful institutional interests were aligning against a single nurse who'd spent $847 to save a life. Hospital administration feared that Sarah's case could set a precedent leading to massive liability lawsuits from patients, insurance companies, and regulatory agencies. If healthcare workers started making independent decisions about patient care based on compassion rather than policy, the entire system of institutional control could collapse. Insurance companies worried that Sarah's story might inspire other healthcare workers to circumvent their denial processes, potentially costing millions in medication and treatment costs that they'd successfully avoided through systematic denials. State nursing regulators faced pressure from healthcare lobbying groups to maintain professional standards that prioritized institutional compliance over individual patient advocacy. Corporate healthcare executives saw Sarah as an existential threat to profit-driven medicine. If nurses started putting patient needs ahead of cost-cutting policies, shareholder profits could plummet across the industry. They didn't need to coordinate their opposition directly. Each institution simply protected its own interests, creating a web of legal, professional, and financial pressure designed to crush anyone who challenged the system that prioritized profits over patients. As Sarah sat in her apartment 3 days after her suspension, surrounded by legal documents she couldn't afford to properly address and bills she couldn't afford to pay, her phone rang. The caller ID showed a blocked number, but something made her answer. "Miss Martinez? This is Agent Patricia Williams with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We need to schedule an interview regarding your recent activities at St. Mary's Hospital and your potential involvement in healthcare fraud violations." Sarah's hands shook as she wrote down the appointment date and time. FBI involvement meant this had escalated far beyond hospital policy violations or nursing board investigations. This was now a federal case that could result in criminal charges, prison time, and permanent destruction of her professional life. That night, she Googled federal charges for healthcare fraud and didn't sleep for 72 straight hours. She had no idea that tomorrow morning, everything was about to change again. Sarah Martinez sat on the concrete steps outside her apartment building at exactly 7:00 a.m., too anxious to stay inside and too exhausted to keep pacing her living room floor. She'd been awake for 76 hours straight, surviving on anxiety, black coffee, and the kind of desperate insomnia that comes from knowing your entire life is about to collapse. The FBI interview was scheduled for 2:00 p.m. Her unemployment benefits had been denied because her termination was for cause. Her mother's memory care facility had left 3 increasingly urgent voicemails about overdue payments. Her landlord had called twice about next month's rent. She had $23.47 in her checking account and a viral video that had somehow made her both famous and unemployable. That's when she saw them. 10 black SUVs turned onto her quiet residential street in perfect formation, like something out of a movie about government raids or presidential motorcades. Sarah's first thought was that the FBI had decided to arrest her publicly, creating a perp walk that would destroy any remaining support she had from the American public. But as the vehicles parked in coordinated precision along the curb, something seemed different. The doors opened simultaneously, but instead of federal agents in tactical gear, out stepped people in business suits, casual clothes, medical scrubs, and one person she recognized immediately from television interviews and congressional hearings. Elizabeth Harper. At 54, Elizabeth Harper was the kind of billionaire philanthropist who made other billionaires uncomfortable. She'd made her fortune in biotech, lost her 23-year-old daughter Catherine to rationed insulin because the young woman couldn't afford her diabetes medication, and had since dedicated her life and resources to destroying the healthcare system that prioritized profits over patients. Sarah Martinez? Elizabeth approached with a warm smile and eyes that carried the weight of personal tragedy transformed into public purpose. "I'm Elizabeth Harper. We need to talk." Behind Elizabeth emerged an array of people that looked like the cast of a movie about taking down corporate corruption. Dr. James Rodriguez, the former Surgeon General who'd resigned in protest over healthcare policy decisions that prioritized pharmaceutical company profits over patient outcomes. Martha Washington, no relation to the historical figure, president of the National Nurses Union, a woman whose battles against hospital corporations had made her both respected and feared across the healthcare industry. Miguel Santos, the civil rights attorney famous for taking down corporate giants who thought their money could buy immunity from justice. His victories against oil companies, pharmaceutical manufacturers, and defense contractors had made him the most feared lawyer in America for anyone whose business model involved harming people for profit. Carmen Santos, Maria's granddaughter, holding a bouquet of flowers and looking like she'd been crying with relief. But the most surprising figure stepping out of the lead vehicle was Tom Nguyen, the hospital pharmacist, carrying a duffel bag and looking like he hadn't slept in days. "Sarah," Tom said as he approached, "I quit St. Mary's yesterday morning, told them exactly what I thought of their investigation, drove through the night from Phoenix, and brought everything they're going to need to destroy Meridian Healthcare Corporation." Sarah's brain felt like it was short-circuiting. Meridian Healthcare? What does that have to do with everything? Elizabeth Harper said, gesturing toward Sarah's apartment. "Can we come inside? We have a lot to discuss, and some of it is going to change how you understand everything that's happened to you." 15 minutes later, Sarah's small living room looked like the headquarters of a political campaign or the war room of a major legal case. Elizabeth Harper sat on Sarah's second-hand couch. Miguel Santos spread legal documents across her coffee table. Dr. Rodriguez reviewed files on his tablet. Martha Washington set up her laptop to show social media feeds. Carmen documented everything with her phone, and Tom Nguyen opened his duffel bag to reveal what looked like evidence from a criminal investigation. "Sarah," Elizabeth began, "48 hours ago, I received a call from Carmen. She told me about your situation, about the investigation, about the FBI interview scheduled for today. I made some phone calls to people I trust, and what we discovered is that your case isn't really about you at all." Miguel Santos looked up from his legal documents with the expression of a prosecutor who'd just found the smoking gun. "Sarah, St. Mary's Hospital has made a critical error in judgment. They've escalated a personnel matter into a federal case by involving the FBI in what they're calling healthcare fraud. But here's what they don't know. My law firm has been investigating St. Mary's parent company, Meridian Healthcare Corporation, for systematic Medicare fraud for the past 6 months." Sarah felt like Alice falling down a rabbit hole where nothing made sense. Medicare fraud? I don't understand what that has to do with buying medication for Maria Santos. Dr. Rodriguez leaned forward, with the intensity of someone who'd spent years watching preventable deaths caused by corporate healthcare policies. "Sarah, in the past year, how many times have you witnessed insurance denials for essential medications that you knew were medically necessary?" Sarah thought about the question. "Dozens. Maybe hundreds. It happens almost every shift." "And how many times did supervisors tell you to discharge patients, despite your medical concerns about their condition?" The realization hit Sarah like a physical blow. "You think this is bigger than just me buying one prescription?" Martha Washington turned her laptop screen towards Sarah, showing social media feeds that made her jaw drop. "Sarah, your story has sparked something unprecedented in healthcare worker advocacy. The hashtag #NursesFirst is trending worldwide with over 2 million posts in the past 72 hours. The screen showed video after video from healthcare workers across America. A pediatric nurse in Texas sharing her story of buying baby formula for a malnourished infant whose mother couldn't afford it after her WIC benefits were denied. An ICU nurse in Detroit explaining how she'd used her own car to drive an uninsured patient to dialysis 3 times a week because the hospital's transportation policy didn't cover non-emergency medical appointments. An emergency room nurse in Miami describing how she'd started providing Spanish translation services after the hospital cut their interpreter program to save money, leaving non-English speaking patients unable to communicate their medical needs. A psychiatric nurse in Seattle revealing that she'd been buying antipsychotic medications for homeless patients because the city's mental health services had been defunded and patients were dying from untreated psychotic episodes. "This isn't about you anymore, Sarah," Elizabeth said with quiet intensity. "This is about a healthcare system that systematically punishes compassion and rewards cruelty. Your case has become the catalyst for healthcare workers across America to start speaking truth about the impossible choices they face every single day." Miguel Santos pulled out a thick folder that looked like evidence in a RICO case. "Sarah, here's what we've discovered about Meridian Healthcare Corporation's business model. They own 847 hospitals nationwide, including St. Mary's. Our forensic accountants have found systematic patterns of insurance denial manipulation, medication rationing, and deliberate understaffing designed to maximize profits at the expense of patient care." Tom Nguyen opened his laptop and showed Sarah spreadsheets that looked like evidence of war crimes. "I've been documenting questionable insurance denials for 2 years, Sarah. Medications that get denied initially, then mysteriously approved after patients pay out of pocket first. I have 847 documented cases of this pattern across 17 Meridian healthcare facilities." Dr. Rodriguez added with clinical precision, "The FBI isn't investigating you for healthcare fraud, Sarah. They're investigating Meridian Healthcare Corporation for systematic patient endangerment and insurance fraud. Your case just gave them the public attention and political pressure they needed to move forward with charges they've been building for months." Carmen Santos spoke up, still recording everything. "My grandmother wants to testify in any legal proceedings. She's been documenting every interaction with St. Mary's billing department since her emergency room visit. They charged her $2,400 for the 15-minute visit where they told her to take aspirin and pray before you helped us." Elizabeth Harper outlined what would happen next with the strategic precision of someone who'd been planning this campaign for months. Meridian Healthcare expects to control this narrative through their corporate communications team and political connections. They expect you to stay quiet, accept a settlement offer, and disappear from public view. Instead, we're going on offense. Tonight, you'll appear on 60 Minutes. Tomorrow morning, you'll testify before Congress in emergency hearings that Senator Elizabeth Warren has agreed to chair. By Friday, we're holding a federal courthouse steps press conference announcing our class action lawsuit representing 50 nurses and 2 million patients who've been harmed by Meridian Healthcare's policies. Martha Washington showed Sarah legal documents that looked like a declaration of war against the corporate healthcare system. The National Nurses Union is filing formal complaints against every Meridian healthcare facility in America for creating hostile work environments that endanger patients by punishing compassionate care. We're calling it the Nurse Sarah Standard, the legal right of healthcare workers to prioritize patient care over corporate profit policies. As the meeting continued, Sarah learned the true scope of what was unfolding around her case. Elizabeth Harper's involvement was deeply personal. "My daughter Catherine died because she rationed insulin to afford rent. The insurance company that denied her coverage is owned by the same parent company as Meridian Healthcare Corporation. This isn't just professional for me, Sarah. This is about preventing other parents from losing their children to corporate greed disguised as healthcare policy." Miguel Santos had been building his case methodically. "I've spent 5 years trying to build a prosecutable case against Meridian Healthcare. You've given us the human face, public attention, and political momentum we needed to take them down. Your courage in helping Maria Santos has opened the door for justice for millions of patients." Dr. Rodriguez saw Sarah's case as an opportunity for systematic change. "I was Surgeon General when the Affordable Care Act passed, Sarah. I watched corporate healthcare systematically undermine every reform we implemented. Your case has created a unique opportunity to expose how the entire system works and demand fundamental changes." While Sarah's team planned their offensive, Meridian Healthcare Corporation was activating their crisis management protocol with the efficiency of a military operation. They hired Washington, D.C.'s most expensive public relations firm, specializing in corporate reputation management during criminal investigations. Their legal team filed emergency injunctions in federal court, attempting to block Sarah's scheduled media appearances, claiming she was violating confidentiality agreements and patient privacy laws. Their lobbying firm, which had received $12 million from healthcare industry clients in the past year, began contacting congressional allies to pressure them against holding hearings about Sarah's case. Private investigators were hired to research Sarah's background, looking for any personal information that could be used to discredit her story or distract from the larger issues her case had raised. Janet Morrison received a personal call from Meridian Healthcare's CEO. Find everything you can use against Martinez. Financial problems, personal issues, medical mistakes, patient complaints, anything that discredits her story and makes her look unprofessional or unstable. Hospital administration began reviewing 8 years of Sarah's employment records with forensic precision, looking for any documentation of patient complaints, medication errors, or policy violations that could be presented as a pattern of problematic behavior. They found her personnel file remarkably clean, which somehow became suspicious to them rather than evidence of her professional competence. At 6:00 p.m. that evening, as Sarah prepared for her first national television interview by trying to figure out what to wear when you don't own professional clothes that haven't been worn during 12-hour nursing shifts, her phone rang with a call that made her hands shake. Miss Martinez, this is Agent Patricia Williams with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I need to inform you that Meridian Healthcare Corporation has filed a federal complaint alleging that you've engaged in a conspiracy to defraud healthcare institutions. They claim your media appearances and fundraising activities constitute organized fraud targeting healthcare systems. Sarah's legal team exchanged glances around her living room. Miguel Santos took the phone with a smile that looked dangerous. Agent Williams, this is Miguel Santos, Miss Martinez's attorney. We'll need to see that federal complaint immediately, and we'll be filing our own federal complaints against Meridian Healthcare within the next 48 hours. After hanging up, Miguel's smile became genuinely pleased. They just made a massive strategic error. By filing federal fraud charges against you, they've opened themselves up to federal scrutiny under RICO statutes. And guess who has jurisdiction over systematic healthcare fraud? The same FBI agents who have been investigating Meridian Healthcare for 6 months. Elizabeth Harper checked her phone with the satisfaction of someone whose carefully laid plans were falling into place. The Washington Post wants an exclusive interview about Meridian Healthcare's business practices. The New York Times is preparing an expose on systematic patient endangerment in corporate healthcare. And I just received a call from Senator Elizabeth Warren's office. She wants to hold emergency hearings within 48 hours. Dr. Rodriguez added, Sarah, CNN wants you for a primetime special about healthcare worker advocacy. MSNBC is planning a documentary about systematic insurance fraud. Fox News wants to interview you about government overreach in healthcare. You've managed to create bipartisan outrage. As Sarah sat in her bathroom that evening, applying makeup for her first national television appearance with hands that still shook slightly, she stared at her reflection and tried to process what had happened to her life in the space of a week. 72 hours ago, she was an unemployed nurse facing financial ruin and FBI investigation. Now she was the center of a national healthcare reform movement with some of the most powerful people in America offering to help her take down a corporate healthcare system that had been killing patients for profit. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. We know where you live. We know where your mother lives. Stop talking or face the consequences. Sarah showed the message to her legal team. Miguel Santos immediately contacted the FBI to report witness intimidation. Elizabeth Harper called her personal security team to arrange protection. Sarah, Elizabeth said with quiet intensity, they're scared. When powerful people get scared, they make desperate choices that often destroy them. Are you prepared for this to get significantly worse before it gets better? Sarah thought about Maria Santos, probably taking her heart medication at that exact moment. Her cardiac rhythm steady and strong because a nurse had decided to spend 847 instead of following policy. I'm ready, she said. But none of them were prepared for what Meridian Healthcare Corporation had planned next. Sarah Martinez woke up at 4:47 a.m. to the sound of her phone buzzing like an angry wasp. In her sleep-deprived state, she thought it might be another death threat or FBI update. Instead, she found herself staring at news headlines that made her feel like she was living in an alternate reality where doing the right thing had somehow become a federal crime. Troubled nurse's dark past revealed. Financial desperation led to healthcare fraud scheme, screamed the headline on a conservative news website that specialized in character assassination disguised as journalism. The article, clearly fed by corporate sources who had unlimited resources and no shame, painted a picture of Sarah that was both recognizable and completely false. Her student loan debt of $127,000 was portrayed as evidence of financial desperation that motivated fraudulent fundraising activities. Her mother's dementia care costs were framed as additional motivation for exploiting patient sympathy to generate illegal income. A parking ticket from 2019 became evidence of a documented pattern of rule-breaking behavior. A patient complaint from 2021, later proven completely unfounded when the patient admitted she'd confused Sarah with another nurse, was resurrected as previous allegations of professional misconduct. Most devastatingly, the article included her home address, forcing her to flee to a hotel that Elizabeth Harper paid for while her security team swept her apartment for surveillance devices. The smear campaign was comprehensive, coordinated, and clearly expensive. Someone with serious resources was trying to destroy her credibility before she could testify about what she'd witnessed in America's healthcare system. Despite the media attacks designed to discredit her before she could speak, Sarah testified before the House Subcommittee on Healthcare at 10:00 a.m. in a hearing room packed with people whose lives had been shaped by the same system she was fighting. The gallery was filled with nurses in uniform who'd taken vacation days to attend, patients in wheelchairs who'd fought insurance denials for necessary medical equipment, family members holding photos of relatives who died waiting for approved treatments, corporate lawyers in expensive suits taking notes for their clients who were watching the proceedings with growing alarm, Representative Johnson from Texas, whose re-election campaigns had received substantial donations from healthcare industry political action committees, attacked immediately with questions clearly designed to discredit Sarah, rather than understand the systematic problems she represented. Ms. Martinez, isn't it true that you violated your nursing oath by practicing medicine without proper oversight or authorization? Sarah had spent hours preparing for this moment with Miguel Santos and Dr. Rodriguez, anticipating every possible attack on her character and actions. Representative Johnson, I didn't practice medicine. Dr. Richards prescribed the medication after examining Maria Santos and determining it was medically necessary to prevent a potentially fatal cardiac event. I purchased the prescribed medication when the patient couldn't afford it and her insurance company denied coverage. But you decided, unilaterally and without consultation with hospital administration or medical supervisors, that established hospital policies didn't apply to you? Miguel Santos, sitting behind Sarah, slid her a note. Stay calm. He's trying to make you lose your temper and look unprofessional. Sarah took a breath and responded with the kind of clinical precision she'd learned from 8 years of dealing with difficult patients and impossible situations. Sir, hospital policy said I should discharge a woman who was experiencing cardiac symptoms and let her die at home because she couldn't afford medication that cost less than most people spend on dinner. Which oath would you have me break? The one to my employer's profit margins or the one to do no harm to patients? The gallery erupted in applause that Representative Johnson's gavel couldn't immediately quiet. Sarah realized she'd just delivered a soundbite that would define the entire healthcare reform debate. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, whose own experience with healthcare costs had shaped her political priorities, yielded her questioning time to Sarah for an extended response. Ms. Martinez, please tell this committee and the American people about other patients you've encountered who were denied necessary medical care due to insurance company profit priorities. Sarah had prepared for this moment, but living through the experiences was different from recounting them in a sterile congressional hearing room. Her voice carried 8 years of frustration, grief, and anger at a system designed to maximize suffering. Last month, I treated a diabetic patient named Robert Chen who was rationing his insulin because his insurance company claimed his doctor-prescribed dosage was excessive and not medically justified. Mr. End of Sense, Chen went into diabetic ketoacidosis, essentially a coma that can kill you, because he was trying to make his insulin last longer. The hospitalization to treat his life-threatening condition cost $34,000. The insulin he needed to prevent the emergency would have cost $340,000. 2 weeks ago, a mother named Jennifer Williams brought her 8-year-old daughter Ashley to our emergency room during an asthma attack. Ashley needed a specific brand of inhaler that works for her severe asthma. Her insurance company denied coverage, recommending a cheaper alternative that Ashley's doctor had already tried and found ineffective for her condition. I watched that little girl struggle to breathe while her mother begged us to help, knowing that the medication she needed was sitting in our pharmacy but might as well have been on the moon because it cost $180 her family didn't have. Sarah's voice began to crack with emotion she'd been suppressing for years. Every single day, I see patients choosing between medication and rent, between treatment and food, between staying alive and keeping their families financially stable. And every single day, hospital administration tells us to follow policy, even when policy kills people. I became a nurse to save lives, Representative Ocasio-Cortez. The system I work in seems deliberately designed to end them for profit. The hearing room fell silent, except for the sound of people crying in the gallery. Meridian Healthcare's CEO, David Preston, testified after Sarah with the polished performance of someone who'd spent years defending corporate policies that prioritize shareholder profits over patient outcomes. We sympathize with Ms. Martinez's emotional response to difficult situations, but healthcare institutions must follow evidence-based protocols designed to protect patients from well-intentioned but potentially dangerous interventions by individual employees. His presentation included PowerPoint slides about liability management, regulatory compliance, and systematic approaches to patient care that prioritize safety over emotional decision-making. What happens when compassionate but medically untrained individuals bypass established safety systems? Patients die from preventable complications. Families file wrongful death lawsuits that bankrupt hospitals. Healthcare costs increase for everyone when institutions face unlimited liability from employee freelancing. Representative Katie Porter from California, famous for her ability to destroy corporate executives with simple mathematics, asked the question that would define the entire hearing. Mr. Preston, according to public financial filings, your company posted $847 million in profits last year, while patients like Maria Santos couldn't afford $847 for life-saving medication. Your annual salary of $12.3 million could have purchased that prescription 500 times. Isn't the real issue that saving lives doesn't maximize shareholder value? David Preston's polished demeanor cracked slightly. Representative Porter, that's an oversimplification of complex healthcare economics and regulatory requirements. It's actually quite simple, Mr. Preston. Your company profits when patients can't afford care. Ms. Martinez sacrificed her financial security when a patient couldn't afford care. One of you is serving humanity, and the other is serving shareholders. Which one do you think represents what healthcare should be? While Sarah testified in Washington, D.C., FBI agents were executing search warrants at 17 Meridian healthcare facilities across 6 states, seizing financial records, insurance communications, internal policy documents, and executive email servers. The timing wasn't coincidental. Sarah's testimony provided media coverage for the Bureau's largest healthcare fraud investigation in 5 years, allowing them to move forward with charges they'd been building while corporate attention was focused on discrediting one nurse. Agent Patricia Williams called Sarah during a hearing break with news that changed everything. "We found what we needed, Sarah." Internal emails from Meridian executives discussing acceptable loss rates for denied coverage. They have actuaries calculating how many patients will die versus the cost of wrongful death lawsuits, and they're choosing the option that saves money. Sarah felt physically sick. They actually calculated death rates for profit margins? One email chain discusses your case specifically. A vice president wrote, "Make an example of the Martinez nurse. We cannot allow employees to think compassion overrides corporate policy. Her destruction will send a message to every healthcare worker in America." That evening, Sarah returned to her hotel to find that the corporate campaign against her had escalated to personal destruction. Her mother's memory care facility had called demanding immediate payment, or they would discharge an 81-year-old woman with dementia to the streets. Death threats were flooding her social media accounts with specific details about her daily routine that suggested surveillance. Private investigators had been questioning her neighbors, asking about her mental stability and financial problems. Hospital security footage of Sarah during her shifts had been leaked to news outlets, edited to make her look erratic and unprofessional. Elizabeth Harper found Sarah sobbing in the hotel bathroom, surrounded by bills she couldn't pay and legal documents she couldn't afford to properly address. "They're trying to break you psychologically before the legal battle really begins, Sarah. This is standard corporate warfare against whistleblowers." "Maybe they're right," Sarah said through tears. "Maybe I am just a financially desperate nurse who made a stupid decision and got in over her head." Elizabeth sat on the bathroom floor next to Sarah, with an expression of someone who'd been through her own version of this battle. "Sarah, look at me. My daughter Catherine died because executives like David Preston decided her life was worth less than their quarterly profit margins. You saved Maria Santos because you decided her life was worth more than your bank account balance. Don't let them convince you that compassion is weakness or that choosing to help people is somehow criminal." Miguel Santos entered the hotel room with news that would shift the entire trajectory of the case. The FBI found something that changes everything. Meridian Healthcare has been systematically denying medications for terminal patients, knowing it would reduce their lifespan and save money on long-term care costs. They have internal documents calling it managed mortality. Tom Yuen, who had been working with federal investigators to analyze Meridian's pharmaceutical data, added, "I've been going through 5 years of prescription records with the FBI's forensic accountants. Meridian has been systematically pushing patients toward medications that cost more but work less effectively. The price difference goes directly into executive bonus calculations." Dr. Rodriguez showed Sarah a document that looked like evidence of war crimes. Quote, "This is Meridian Healthcare's internal training manual for insurance denial specialists. They train employees to find reasons to deny coverage, with quotas for rejections and bonuses for exceeding denial targets. Saving money is prioritized over saving lives in their actual written policies." Carmen Santos, still documenting everything for the historical record, spoke up with information that showed how far the corporate retaliation had spread. "My grandmother received a bill today for exactly $847, the cost of the medication you bought for her. Meridian is trying to collect payment twice, once from you and once from her. They're trying to profit from your compassion." Miguel Santos announced their legal strategy with the satisfaction of a prosecutor who'd finally assembled an unbeatable case. "We're filing a federal class action lawsuit under RICO statutes representing every nurse employed by Meridian Healthcare and every patient denied care by their policies. We're seeking $50 billion in damages and a federal court order mandating patient care prioritization over profit maximization." The lawsuit allegations were comprehensive and devastating. Systematic healthcare fraud involving intentional insurance claim denials, deliberate patient endangerment through cost-cutting policies, retaliation against employees who prioritized patient care over corporate profits, conspiracy to manipulate healthcare costs through denial of medically necessary treatments, racketeering under federal RICO statutes for operating a criminal enterprise disguised as healthcare provision. "Sarah," Miguel explained, "you're no longer just a defendant in their retaliation case. You're the lead plaintiff in our federal prosecution of the entire corporate healthcare system that's been killing patients for profit." As Sarah prepared for another night of insomnia and anxiety, her phone rang with a call that reminded her why she'd become a nurse in the first place. "Mija, I see you on the television, and you look so tired, so worried," Maria Santos said from Phoenix, her voice strong and clear because her heart medication was working properly. "Mrs. Santos, I'm okay. How are you feeling? My heart is strong because of you, but I worry about your heart. Are you taking care of yourself during this difficult time?" Sarah started crying again, overwhelmed by the simple kindness from someone whose life she'd saved. "Mrs. Santos, I don't know if I can continue fighting this anymore. Everyone is attacking me, questioning my motives, investigating my entire life, looking for ways to discredit me." Sarah, listen to an old woman who has lived through many battles in her lifetime. When they attack you personally instead of your actions, it means they cannot defend their own actions. When they question your motives instead of your results, it means they cannot question the fact that you saved my life. Nothing they say can change that truth. After hanging up, Sarah stared out her hotel window at the Washington, D.C. skyline, thinking about the choice that had started this entire battle. Tomorrow, she would face congressional questioning designed to destroy her credibility. Next week, she would face federal prosecutors who wanted to send her to prison. But Maria Santos was alive and healthy because a nurse had decided that following her conscience was more important than following corporate policy. Sarah Martinez was finally ready to fight back with everything she had. Sarah Martinez learned what a perp walk felt like at exactly 4:17 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, when federal marshals woke her from the first real sleep she'd managed in 6 days by pounding on her hotel room door with the kind of authoritative violence that means your life is about to change. Forever. Through the peephole, she saw 2 federal marshals with arrest warrants, backup officers, and what looked like enough tactical gear to arrest someone significantly more dangerous than a nurse who'd spent $847 to save a patient's life. "Sarah Martinez, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud, wire fraud across state lines, and racketeering under federal RICO statutes," the lead marshal announced as he read her Miranda rights while she stood in her pajamas, handcuffed in the hotel hallway where other guests peeked out their doors to watch a criminal being arrested. As they processed her through federal booking, Sarah's phone buzzed with news alerts that would define her public image for the foreseeable future. Nurse Sarah arrested in federal healthcare fraud scheme. FBI raids, Martinez Associates in multi-state healthcare investigation. Fraudulent fundraising scheme bilks Americans out of millions. Miguel Santos arrived at the federal courthouse as Sarah was being fingerprinted and photographed like any other criminal. He told reporters gathered outside, "This is a coordinated character assassination designed to silence a whistleblower. They arrested her at 4 a.m. to ensure maximum negative media coverage and minimum public support. But the damage was immediate and devastating to her public image. In federal court 3 hours later, prosecutor Amanda Richardson presented a case that sounded damning to anyone who didn't understand the full context of Sarah's situation. Your Honor, the defendant Sarah Martinez has orchestrated a sophisticated fraud scheme involving multiple accomplices across state lines. She deliberately violated hospital policy to create viral social media content, then used that content to solicit fraudulent donations from sympathetic Americans who believed they were supporting a humanitarian cause. The prosecution's evidence was presented with the kind of legal precision designed to make compassion look like a crime. Sarah's GoFundMe account, which had raised $847,000 from people inspired by her story, was presented as proof of fraudulent enrichment through exploitation of patient sympathy. Elizabeth Harper's support was characterized as evidence of conspiracy with wealthy co-conspirators to manipulate public opinion and media coverage. Tom Wynn's pharmacy documentation was described as proof of systematic policy violations coordinated between multiple healthcare workers. Carmen Santos's recordings were presented as premeditated documentation designed to create fraudulent viral content for financial gain. Prosecutor Richardson continued with the kind of narrative that transforms heroes into villains. This defendant portrays herself as a compassionate healthcare worker, but evidence demonstrates a calculated individual who exploited a patient's medical crisis for personal financial gain and national attention. Miguel Santos objected repeatedly, but the narrative was devastatingly effective for anyone who didn't know the real story. The bail hearing was designed to ensure Sarah remained in federal custody where she couldn't defend herself publicly. Judge Patricia Morrison, no relation to Janet Morrison but apparently sharing the same perspective on nurses who violated corporate policies, set bail at $500,000. The defendant has demonstrated a willingness to violate institutional policies for personal gain, Judge Morrison explained. Her extensive social media presence and ongoing fundraising activities suggest both flight risk and potential for continued fraudulent activity if released. Elizabeth Harper stood immediately. Your Honor, I'll post the full bail amount for Miss Martinez. Mrs. Harper, given your documented involvement in this alleged conspiracy, the court cannot accept surety from a co-conspirator in the same criminal enterprise. Sarah Martinez was remanded to federal detention pending trial. Federal detention was designed to break the spirit of white-collar criminals through psychological pressure rather than physical violence. Sarah found herself in a concrete cell with Angela Rodriguez, a drug dealer who'd been caught selling fentanyl near elementary schools, and Patricia Williams, a tax attorney who'd helped wealthy clients hide $50 million in offshore accounts. Angela recognized Sarah from news coverage. "You're that nurse who got rich off helping people, right? Smart hustle, making people think you're some kind of saint?" "I didn't get rich," Sarah protested, sitting on her narrow bunk. "I spent my own money to help a patient who needed medication." Angela laughed with the cynical amusement of someone who'd been working criminal angles her entire life. "That's what they all say, sweetie. My boyfriend said he was helping the community when he sold drugs to kids. Everyone's got their story about helping people." The comparison devastated Sarah more than any legal proceeding had. Was she really what they said she was? Had her genuine desire to help Maria Santos somehow become the calculated fraud scheme that prosecutors described? From her jail cell, Sarah watched her support network fragment under federal pressure and media scrutiny. Tom Wynn, facing federal charges as an alleged co-conspirator in systematic healthcare fraud, publicly recanted his support in a statement clearly written by lawyers. "I was manipulated by Sarah Martinez into violating pharmacy protocols and federal medication distribution laws. I deeply regret my involvement in this criminal scheme and accept full responsibility for allowing myself to be used in fraudulent activities." Dr. James Rodriguez, under investigation by the medical board for association with criminal healthcare activities, distanced himself from Sarah's case. "While I support healthcare reform through legal and appropriate channels, I cannot endorse illegal activities or systematic policy violations that endanger patients and healthcare institutions." 3 nurses who had initially supported Sarah published a joint statement that felt like professional betrayal. "Upon reflection and consultation with legal counsel, we fear the Nurse Sarah movement encourages dangerous policy violations that could harm patients and create massive liability issues for healthcare workers nationwide." Even Carmen Santos, under FBI questioning about potential conspiracy to create fraudulent social media content for financial gain, deleted her original video and posted a public apology. I never intended to help anyone break laws or engage in fraudulent activities. I regret any role my social media posts played in this criminal scheme. With Sarah unable to defend herself from jail, media coverage became uniformly negative, transforming her from healthcare hero to criminal mastermind in the span of a week. The Fraud Nurse. How one woman's greed exploited America's healthcare crisis for personal gain. Nurses across America reject Sarah Martinez's standard as dangerous and illegal. Elderly patient speaks out. I never asked her to break the law for me. The last headline destroyed Sarah completely. Maria Santos, under pressure from immigration investigators who threatened to pursue deportation proceedings against her family, and confused by the complex legal situation she didn't fully understand, told reporters, I am grateful for medical help, but I never wanted anyone to break rules or laws for me. I don't want to be involved in criminal activities. Federal prosecutors offered Sarah a plea deal designed to destroy her life completely while protecting the healthcare system that had created the crisis in the first place. Plead guilty to conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud. Accept a 5-year federal prison sentence. Pay $2 million in restitution to victims of your fraudulent scheme. Surrender your nursing license permanently. Agree never to discuss healthcare issues publicly or engage in any form of healthcare advocacy. In exchange, we'll recommend minimum security prison and won't pursue federal charges against your elderly mother for receiving potentially fraudulent payments for her memory care facility. The implicit threat was crystal clear. Fight this case, and they would destroy your family along with your life. Miguel Santos visited Sarah in federal detention with news that should have been encouraging but felt meaningless in her current psychological state. They're trying to break you mentally before we get to trial, Sarah. This is standard prosecutorial intimidation designed to force plea deals from innocent defendants. Miguel, maybe they're right about me, Sarah said, wearing an orange jumpsuit that made her look like the criminal everyone now believed she was. Maybe I am just a narcissist who exploited a sick woman for attention and money. Sarah, listen to me carefully. In 3 weeks, this entire case falls apart when we present evidence that will exonerate you and expose Meridian Healthcare's systematic fraud. But you have to survive the next 3 weeks psychologically intact. I don't know if I can survive this. My mother called yesterday. Her memory care facility is threatening to discharge her because of criminal association policies. My 8-year-old nephew won't talk to me because kids at school are calling his aunt a thief. My sister is considering changing her last name to protect her children from association with my crimes. The betrayal that broke Sarah's spirit came from the most unexpected source. Elizabeth Harper, facing federal investigation into her foundation's alleged conspiracy activities and pressure from her own board of directors, held a press conference that shattered Sarah's remaining hope. I want to clarify my involvement with Sarah Martinez and address concerns about my foundation's activities. While I initially supported her cause based on limited information, recent federal evidence suggests her motivations and methods were not as pure or legal as I believed. My foundation can no longer provide legal or financial support for Ms. Martinez. We encourage all healthcare workers to follow proper protocols and work within existing legal systems rather than taking matters into their own hands. Sarah watched the press conference from her jail cell, feeling completely abandoned by everyone who had promised to help her fight the system that prioritized profits over patients. That night, correctional officers found Sarah sitting on her cell floor, staring at bedsheets she'd twisted into a rope, contemplating whether ending her life would be easier than continuing to fight a battle that had destroyed everything she cared about. I just wanted to help people, she told the crisis counselor they brought in. I became a nurse to save lives. Now everyone thinks I'm a criminal who exploited a dying woman for money and attention. Sarah, are you thinking about hurting yourself? I'm thinking about how much simpler everything would be if I just disappeared. My mother would be safe from investigation. My family wouldn't be embarrassed by association with me. The nurses who supported me wouldn't face professional retaliation for defending a criminal. Sarah was placed on 24-hour suicide watch, her final humiliation broadcast on news outlets as evidence of her guilty conscience and psychological breakdown under pressure of criminal prosecution. Alone in her suicide watch cell, wearing paper clothes to prevent self-harm and monitored by cameras 24 hours a day, Sarah Martinez had a moment of devastating clarity about what had happened to her life. The system wasn't punishing her for breaking hospital policy or violating nursing standards. They were punishing her for exposing the system's fundamental cruelty and showing how easily lives could be saved if human compassion was prioritized over corporate profit. Every attack on her character, every manufactured criminal charge, every betrayal by former allies served one central purpose: ensure that no other healthcare worker would ever dare choose patient care over institutional compliance. They didn't care about her 847 purchase or whether she'd violated hospital policies. They cared that her simple act of compassion had revealed how many patients were dying unnecessarily while healthcare executives bought yachts with the money saved by denying coverage. Sarah realized she faced a choice that would define not only her own future but the future of American healthcare. Accept the plea deal and validate the system that would have killed Maria Santos, or continue fighting and risk losing everything she had left. As she sat in that cold federal detention cell, monitored by cameras and wearing clothes designed to prevent suicide, Sarah remembered Maria Santos grabbing her hands and speaking blessings in Spanish, calling her an angel for spending 847 to save a life. For the first time in weeks, surrounded by concrete walls and federal charges designed to destroy her, Sarah Martinez smiled. The battle wasn't over. It was just beginning, and she finally understood what she was really fighting for. Miguel Santos received the phone call that would change everything at exactly 2:17 a.m. on a Thursday morning. The voice was digitally altered, but the message was delivered with the precision of someone who had been planning this moment for months. Check your secure email server in 30 minutes. You'll find everything you need to destroy Meridian Healthcare Corporation and free your client. This ends tonight. The anonymous email contained terabytes of internal Meridian Healthcare documents spanning 5 years. Executive communications, financial records, patient outcome data, insurance manipulation protocols, and evidence of systematic healthcare fraud that made Sarah's 847 medication purchase look like jaywalking compared to mass murder. The anonymous source included a note that explained their motivation. I am a senior executive at Meridian Healthcare Corporation. What they're doing to Sarah Martinez is the final straw that broke my conscience. This company has killed thousands of patients for profit margins. Sarah tried to save one life, and they're destroying her for it. I can't watch this anymore. End this corporate murder machine. Miguel worked through the night in his hotel room, discovering evidence that staggered even his cynical expectations after years of fighting corporate criminals. The Mortality Quotas Program. Internal memos revealed Meridian Healthcare executives setting annual acceptable mortality rates for denied coverage, with executive bonuses tied to exceeding death rate targets while maintaining legal immunity through careful policy language. The Martinez Protocol. After Sarah's story went viral, Meridian implemented company-wide policies to identify and terminate emotionally compromised employees who might interfere with profit optimization through compassionate decision-making. The Political Corruption Network. Email chains showing 50 million in coordinated political donations specifically targeted at prosecutors, judges, and regulatory officials in districts where Meridian faced legal challenges. Federal prosecutor Amanda Richardson had received 25-0 for her re-election campaign 1 week before Sarah's arrest. The Character Assassination Campaign. Detailed operational plans for destroying Sarah's reputation, including hiring private investigators to fabricate evidence, paying former colleagues to recant their support, and coordinating media attacks through friendly journalists who received regular payments for favorable coverage. The International Death Experiments. Evidence that Meridian Healthcare had been implementing managed mortality programs in 12 developing countries, deliberately providing ineffective medications to reduce long-term treatment costs while maintaining plausible deniability about patient deaths. At 6:00 a.m., Miguel Santos filed an emergency motion to dismiss all charges against Sarah, accompanied by a 400-page legal brief that read like an indictment of the entire American healthcare system. The motion included exhibits that would reshape healthcare law, arcloudedby.com, executive emails referring to Sarah as an existential threat to industry profit models, and discussing her necessary elimination as an example to other employees. Financial records proving payments to witnesses who had recanted their support for Sarah, including Tom Wynn, who received 50-0 to publicly denounce her. Internal Meridian documents proving Sarah's case was selected for maximum deterrent effect to discourage other healthcare workers from prioritizing patient care over corporate policy. Evidence that prosecutor Amanda Richardson had violated federal ethical guidelines by accepting campaign contributions from the primary target of her criminal investigation. At 10:00 a.m., Miguel Santos held a press conference outside the federal courthouse that would be remembered as the moment American healthcare reform became inevitable. Ladies and gentlemen, Sarah Martinez is not a criminal. She is a political prisoner being held by a system that literally profits from human death and suffering. He presented the leaked documents to assembled reporters. These internal communications prove Meridian healthcare executives discussing which patients they can afford to lose to maintain quarterly profit targets. They have actuarial spreadsheets calculating death rates versus wrongful death lawsuit costs, and they consistently choose the option that maximizes shareholder profits. Miguel's voice rose with prosecutorial fury as he delivered the evidence that would destroy Meridian Healthcare. This email from CEO David Preston, sent 3 days after Sarah's arrest, celebrates what he calls the successful neutralization of the Martinez threat and discusses expanding their employee elimination program to remove compassionate personnel across all their healthcare facilities. They didn't arrest Sarah Martinez because she committed healthcare fraud. They arrested her because she exposed their healthcare fraud. They're not prosecuting a criminal conspiracy. They are the criminal conspiracy. Within 2 hours of Miguel's press conference, emergency congressional sessions were called by representatives who had previously questioned Sarah's methods, but now understood the systematic corruption she had exposed. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez led a bipartisan coalition demanding Sarah's immediate release. This is not about healthcare policy disagreements anymore. This is about whether corporations can use federal prosecutors as their personal enforcement arm to silence whistleblowers who expose their crimes. Senator Elizabeth Warren announced immediate emergency hearings with subpoena power. If federal prosecutors are accepting money from corporations they're supposed to be investigating, our entire justice system has been corrupted beyond recognition. Even conservative Republicans expressed outrage at the prosecutorial misconduct, with Senator Ted Cruz stating, "Whether you agree with her actions or disagree with her methods, Sarah Martinez deserves a fair trial based on evidence, not a corporate-sponsored persecution designed to protect healthcare industry profits." FBI Director Rebecca Thompson, facing congressional pressure and media scrutiny that threatened her career, made an unprecedented decision that would reshape federal law enforcement priorities. She ordered a complete internal investigation into the prosecution of Sarah Martinez and the relationship between her prosecutors and healthcare industry interests. The Federal Bureau of Investigation exists to serve justice and protect American citizens, not to serve corporate interests and protect industry profits, she announced. If our prosecutors have been compromised by financial conflicts of interest, we will expose and prosecute that corruption regardless of political consequences. Agent Patricia Williams, who had originally investigated Sarah under pressure from her superiors, provided a sworn affidavit revealing the institutional pressure she had received to find evidence supporting Meridian's narrative about systematic fraud, regardless of what her investigation actually discovered. The leaked documents vindicated everyone who had originally supported Sarah, and they returned to her defense with renewed determination and public credibility. Elizabeth Harper held her own press conference. "I withdrew my support for Sarah Martinez because I was led to believe she had deceived me about her motivations and methods. These leaked documents prove I was the one deceived by a systematic corporate propaganda campaign designed to destroy an innocent woman who threatened their profit margins." Dr. James Rodriguez testified before emergency congressional hearings. The medical community has been intimidated into silence by exactly this kind of corporate retaliation against healthcare workers who prioritize patient outcomes over financial considerations. Sarah Martinez represents every healthcare professional who has ever chosen patient care over profit margins and been punished for it. Tom Wynn publicly recanted his previous denunciation. "I was threatened with federal prosecution and permanent loss of my pharmacy license if I didn't publicly denounce Sarah Martinez." These leaked documents prove that threatening healthcare workers into silence was always their strategy, turn allies against each other through fear and financial pressure. Carmen Santos posted a new viral video that would be viewed 50 million times in the first week. "They tried to make me betray the woman who saved my grandmother's life by threatening my family with deportation. I'm ashamed I listened to their threats. Sarah Martinez is a hero who exposed a system that kills patients for money, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth." Sarah's case, now clearly framed as corporate persecution of a healthcare whistleblower rather than criminal fraud prosecution, sparked international attention and support. Canada's healthcare minister publicly invited Sarah to immigrate. Any healthcare professional willing to sacrifice her financial security to save a patient's life would be welcomed with honor in our healthcare system. The European Union announced immediate investigations into Meridian Healthcare's overseas operations, with preliminary evidence suggesting the same managed mortality programs were being implemented in EU member countries. Doctors Without Borders offered Sarah a leadership position. The qualities that made Sarah Martinez a policy violator in corporate American healthcare make her an ideal humanitarian healthcare leader internationally. The Justice for Sarah movement began trending globally, but more importantly, Nurses First became a rallying cry for healthcare workers worldwide who had been forced to choose between their consciences and their careers. Nurses across America began publicly documenting their own policy violations to save patients. Pediatric nurses sharing stories of buying baby formula for malnourished infants when hospital policies prohibited direct patient financial assistance. ICU nurses revealing they had violated visiting hour restrictions to allow dying patients to spend final moments with family members. Emergency room nurses admitting they had provided language translation services after hospitals eliminated interpreter positions to reduce costs. The movement forced a national conversation about fundamental healthcare priorities. Should healthcare workers prioritize institutional policies designed to maximize profits or patient lives that could be saved through compassionate care? In her federal detention cell, Sarah watched news coverage of her vindication with mixed emotions that reflected the psychological trauma of systematic persecution, followed by sudden redemption. The evidence would clear her name and expose the criminal conspiracy that had targeted her, but it couldn't erase weeks of character assassination, professional destruction, and psychological warfare designed to break her spirit. Miguel Santos visited her with news of her imminent release. All federal charges will be dismissed tomorrow morning. Meridian Healthcare Corporation is facing federal racketeering charges under RICO statutes. Prosecutor Amanda Richardson has been removed from all cases and faces federal ethics violations that could end her career. "What about my nursing license?" Sarah asked, still wearing the orange jumpsuit that had become her symbol of persecution. The state nursing board announced they're not only reversing their investigation, but presenting you with their highest honor for professional excellence under extreme circumstances. And employment? I still need to work to support my mother and pay my bills. Miguel smiled with the satisfaction of someone delivering life-changing news. You won't need traditional employment, Sarah. Elizabeth Harper is funding a new nonprofit healthcare foundation dedicated to supporting healthcare workers who face retaliation for prioritizing patient care. She wants you to run it with an annual salary of $200, full medical and legal benefits, and a mandate to help other healthcare workers who find themselves in situations similar to yours. As Sarah prepared for release from federal detention, she reflected on the journey that had transformed her from an unemployed nurse facing financial ruin into a nationally recognized healthcare reform advocate. They had tried to destroy her reputation, break her spirit, and turn her allies against her through systematic intimidation and character assassination. They had nearly succeeded in convincing her that compassion was a character flaw and that helping patients was somehow criminal. But their own greed, arrogance, and systematic cruelty had provided the evidence necessary to expose the entire healthcare system that prioritized profits over patients. Tomorrow, she would walk free from federal detention. Next week, she would testify before Congress again, this time as a vindicated whistleblower, rather than a suspected criminal. Most importantly, Maria Santos was alive and healthy, her heart medication working perfectly, because one nurse had decided that saving lives was more important than following policies designed to maximize corporate profits. Sarah Martinez realized she hadn't just survived the system's attempt to destroy her for exposing their crimes. She was about to help destroy the system that had been systematically destroying patients for decades. Sarah Martinez walked out of federal detention at exactly 6:47 a.m. on a crisp October morning, flanked by Miguel Santos and surrounded by a sea of humanity that stretched for 6 city blocks. Hundreds of nurses in scrubs who had taken personal days to witness this moment. Patients in wheelchairs who had fought insurance denials for medical equipment they needed to survive. Families holding photographs of relatives who had died waiting for insurance companies to approve treatments that might have saved their lives. The media presence was overwhelming, but this time Sarah controlled the narrative instead of being destroyed by it. She stood at the federal courthouse microphone, no longer the terrified nurse who had been arrested at 4 a.m. for the crime of spending $847 to save a patient's life. She was now a vindicated whistleblower who had exposed the largest healthcare fraud conspiracy in American history. 47 days ago, I spent $847 to save a woman's life, Sarah began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had been tested by fire and emerged stronger. Today, I walk free because brave people inside Meridian Healthcare Corporation decided that exposing systematic corporate murder was worth risking their careers and their freedom. Her voice grew stronger as she delivered words that would reshape American healthcare policy. They tried to destroy me not because I broke their rules, but because I exposed their crimes. Every attack on my character was designed to hide their systematic killing of patients for quarterly profit targets. Every criminal charge against me was filed to distract from their criminal enterprise disguised as healthcare provision. The crowd erupted in sustained applause, but Sarah raised her hand for silence because she had more to say. This was never about me, and it's not ending with my vindication. This is about every healthcare worker who has been forced to choose between saving lives and saving their jobs. This is about every patient who has died because their life was deemed less valuable than corporate stock prices. This is about fundamentally transforming a system that treats human beings as profit opportunities rather than people deserving compassionate care. Within 72 hours of Sarah's release, federal prosecutors unsealed indictments against 17 Meridian healthcare executives that read like charges against an organized crime syndicate rather than a healthcare corporation. CEO David Preston faced 847 individual counts, one for each dollar Sarah had spent to save Maria Santos, including conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud, racketeering under federal RICO statutes, money laundering through fraudulent insurance schemes, obstruction of justice for coordinating Sarah's persecution, and international healthcare fraud for implementing managed mortality programs in 12 countries. The federal charges carried a maximum sentence of 847 years in prison and $50 billion in fines and restitution. Sarah returned to Congress for the third time, but now as the star witness in hearings that would fundamentally reshape American healthcare regulation. The committee room was packed with cameras documenting history, corporate lobbyists taking notes for damage control strategies, and healthcare executives consulting with their criminal defense attorneys. Representative Katie Porter began the hearing with a question that defined the scope of systematic healthcare fraud. Ms. Martinez, based on internal Meridian healthcare documents provided by federal investigators, how many preventable patient deaths resulted from their profit maximization policies? Sarah had spent weeks analyzing the leaked documents with healthcare policy experts and federal investigators. Her answer would reshape public understanding of corporate healthcare. Based on Meridian's own mortality calculations, insurance denial patterns, and documented patient outcome data spanning 5 years, federal investigators estimate between 50, 0, and 75, 0 preventable deaths directly attributable to their systematic denial of medically necessary care. The hearing room fell silent as representatives and observers processed the scope of corporate-sponsored patient deaths. Representative Porter continued, "For comparison, that represents more preventable deaths than American combat casualties in the Vietnam War, caused not by enemy action, but by corporate spreadsheets that calculated human lives as acceptable losses for profit maximization." Sarah presented the most damning evidence from her collaboration with federal investigators. This internal Meridian document, dated 8 months ago, projects that their enhanced mortality management program will generate $2.3 billion in annual savings by 2026. The projected savings come specifically from patients dying before their medical treatments become expensive to provide. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez yielded her questioning time to Maria Santos, who had flown from Phoenix to testify about her experience as both a patient and a symbol of systematic healthcare failure. "My heart beat strong today because Sarah Martinez decided my life was worth $847, Maria said in clear, determined English she had been practicing for weeks. Meridian healthcare executives decided my death was worth $2,300 in treatment savings. Which person represents what healthcare should be in America? The lawsuit Miguel Santos filed became the largest healthcare settlement in American legal history. Meridian Healthcare Corporation agreed to pay $50 billion in damages to patients and families harmed by their systematic denial policies, plus an additional $25 billion for healthcare system reforms. The settlement included groundbreaking provisions that would reshape American healthcare. The Sarah Martinez Standard. Healthcare workers cannot be disciplined, terminated, or retaliated against for prioritizing patient care over cost-cutting institutional policies. Mandatory patient advocacy protocols. All healthcare institutions must establish independent patient advocacy programs with authority to override financial considerations when patient lives are endangered. Executive personal liability. Healthcare corporate executives face personal, criminal, and financial liability for implementing policies that result in preventable patient deaths. Insurance denial transparency. All insurance coverage denials must be publicly reported with detailed medical justification and patient outcome follow-up data. Sarah's personal settlement was $50 million, but she announced she was donating the entire amount to establish the Maria Santos Foundation for Healthcare Justice, dedicated to supporting patients denied necessary medical care and healthcare workers facing retaliation for raid. Compassionate patient advocacy. The healthcare fraud scandal triggered comprehensive congressional action that had been politically impossible before Sarah's case exposed the scope of systematic patient endangerment. The Healthcare Worker Protection Act passed with overwhelming bipartisan support, making it a federal crime to retaliate against medical professionals who prioritize patient care over institutional cost-cutting policies. The Patient Life Protection Act required insurance companies to prove medical necessity before denying coverage, with federal penalties for frivolous denials that endangered patient health. The Healthcare Executive Accountability Act established personal criminal liability for corporate executives whose policies resulted in preventable patient deaths, treating healthcare fraud as equivalent to manslaughter when patients died as a direct result of denied care. Sarah testified in support of each bill with the moral authority of someone who had risked everything to expose systematic healthcare corruption. These laws won't prevent another Maria Santos from needing medication she can't afford, but they will prevent healthcare systems from killing patients like her for profit while destroying healthcare workers like me for trying to save them. The international impact of Sarah's case extended far beyond American healthcare reform. The European Union banned American healthcare corporations from operating in member countries until they complied with Sarah Martinez standards for patient care prioritization over profit maximization. Canada created expedited immigration procedures for American healthcare workers, fleeing corporate healthcare persecution for patient advocacy activities. The World Health Organization launched comprehensive investigations into systematic patient endangerment by multinational healthcare corporations, finding evidence of managed mortality programs in 17 countries. Doctors Without Borders established the Sarah Martinez Fellowship for healthcare workers worldwide who faced retaliation for choosing patient care over institutional compliance. 1 year after her arrest, Sarah addressed the American Nurses Association annual convention as their keynote speaker, representing a transformation from persecuted employee to healthcare reform leader. They tried to make me a cautionary tale about what happens when nurses think compassion is more important than corporate compliance, she told 15. Zero healthcare workers who had traveled from across America to hear her speak. Instead, they made me a symbol of what healthcare could become if we put patients before profits and human lives before shareholder dividends. Sarah announced the launch of her foundation's first major initiative. The Sarah Martinez Healthcare Justice Foundation is establishing a $100 million fund to pay medical bills for patients denied insurance coverage. We're not waiting for the system to change. We're changing it ourselves, one patient at a time, one act of compassion at a time. The most powerful moment of the convention came when Maria Santos, now Sarah's foundation co-founder, addressed the audience of healthcare workers. Sarah Martinez did not save my life with $847, Maria said to a silent auditorium. She saved my life with courage. Courage to choose compassion over compliance. Courage to risk her career for a stranger's life. Courage to fight a system designed to profit from human suffering. Maria's voice grew stronger as she delivered the challenge that would define healthcare workers' professional obligations. Now we ask each of you for the same courage. When you see policies that harm patients, speak up. When you see suffering, you can prevent, act. When the system tells you to choose profits over people, choose people every time. The 15,000 nurses in attendance gave Maria Santos a standing ovation that lasted 12 minutes and was broadcast live on every major network. 2 years after Sarah Martinez spent $847 to buy Maria Santos's heart medication, she returned to St. Mary's Hospital not as an employee but as the owner. Her foundation had purchased the facility from Meridian Healthcare during their bankruptcy proceedings following federal criminal convictions. The hospital was renamed Santos Martinez Medical Center and operated under revolutionary principles that would be replicated across the country. No patient denied medical care for inability to pay. All employees empowered to prioritize patient needs over financial considerations. Executive compensation tied to patient outcomes rather than profit margins. Complete transparency in pricing, treatment decisions, and patient outcome data. Sarah's first act as owner was to rehire every nurse who had been terminated for supporting her during the investigation, with salary increases and comprehensive benefits. On the 3rd anniversary of Carmen Santos's viral video, Sarah reflected on how one decision had changed not only her life, but American healthcare. People call me a hero for spending $847 to save Maria Santos's life, she said during an interview that would be viewed by 50 million people. But the real heroes are the patients who survive every day despite a healthcare system designed to eliminate them for profit margins. The real heroes are healthcare workers who choose compassion daily, even when it costs them everything they've worked for. The real heroes are families who fight for their loved ones against insurance companies that see human beings as expenses to minimize rather than lives to preserve. I did what any decent person would do. I chose life over money, compassion over compliance, humanity over corporate policy. The tragedy isn't that I made that choice. The tragedy is that making such a choice was so extraordinary in American healthcare that it became international news. Maria Santos, now 72, and serving as the foundation's inspirational chairwoman, added the final perspective on their shared journey. Sarah didn't just save my life with $847. She saved the idea that healthcare should be about healing people rather than maximizing profits. She saved the belief that human compassion can triumph over corporate greed when ordinary people have extraordinary courage. She saved all of us by showing us what healthcare workers can accomplish when they refuse to accept that following immoral policies is more important than saving human lives. The story concluded where it began, with healthcare workers making daily choices between following institutional policies and saving patient lives. But now, thanks to Sarah Martinez's courage and the systematic reforms her case had created, more healthcare workers were empowered to save lives without destroying their careers. The American healthcare system was finally being forced to prioritize patients over profits, one saved life at a time. 5 years after Sarah Martinez spent $847 to save Maria Santos's life, Dr. Ender Antez, Sarah Martinez, she had earned her doctorate in healthcare policy while reforming the American healthcare system. Stood in the intensive care unit of Santos Martinez Medical Center, watching her nursing staff provide life-saving care without worrying about insurance pre-authorizations or corporate cost-cutting mandates. The hospital operated at full capacity with a waiting list of healthcare workers from across America wanting to join their patient-centered care model. Medical school applications had increased 300% nationwide, with students citing the Martinez Standard as their primary motivation for entering healthcare professions. The ripple effects of one nurse's decision to prioritize compassion over compliance had fundamentally transformed American healthcare. Policy transformation. The Sarah Martinez laws were now federal standards in all 50 states, protecting healthcare workers who prioritized patient care while holding executives criminally liable for policies that resulted in preventable patient deaths. Cultural revolution. Medical schools now taught compassionate compliance as a core ethical framework, the systematic approach to challenging harmful institutional policies while maintaining patient safety and professional standards. Economic impact. Healthcare costs had decreased 40% nationwide as hospitals competed on patient outcomes rather than profit margins. The Santos Martinez model of patient-centered care had been successfully implemented in 847 hospitals across America. International healthcare reform. Martinez Standard hospitals operated in 67 countries, providing a global network of healthcare institutions where patient needs were prioritized over corporate profit maximization. The Maria Santos Foundation had become the largest healthcare advocacy organization in America, with measurable impacts that validated Sarah's decision to fight rather than accept the plea deal that would have silenced her. 500 patients had received foundation assistance for medical bills denied by insurance companies. 50 healthcare workers had received legal support when facing retaliation for patient advocacy activities. 200 free clinics had been established in underserved communities where corporate healthcare had withdrawn services due to insufficient profit margins. 10 nursing students annually received Nurse Sarah scholarships for students committed to patient-centered care over institutional compliance. Maria Santos, now 73 and beloved as the foundation's chairwoman, traveled internationally sharing her story. One nurse's $847 changed global healthcare forever by proving that individual courage can transform systematic cruelty. Imagine what we can accomplish when all healthcare workers choose compassion over corporate compliance. The executives who had tried to destroy Sarah faced consequences that demonstrated how completely the power balance had shifted. CEO David Preston was serving a 45-year federal sentence and had been ordered to pay $2.3 billion in personal restitution. Meridian Healthcare Corporation had been dissolved completely, its assets distributed to patient compensation funds and healthcare reform initiatives. Prosecutor Amanda Richardson had been disbarred and faced federal corruption charges for accepting payments from healthcare industry interests while prosecuting their critics. Janet Morrison, the hospital administrator who had orchestrated Sarah's persecution, was serving a 15-year sentence for conspiracy to obstruct justice and retaliation against healthcare whistleblowers. 17 other healthcare corporations had faced similar federal prosecutions, with 847 executives now serving prison sentences for systematic patient endangerment and healthcare fraud. The corporate healthcare model that prioritized shareholder profits over patient lives had largely collapsed, replaced by patient-centered institutions modeled on Sarah's foundation principles. Sarah's personal life reflected the transformation that courage and principle could create. Her mother, now 86, lived in the premier memory care facility at Santos Martinez Medical Center, receiving the finest healthcare available while surrounded by staff who understood that her dignity was more important than cost management. Sarah's nephew, now 18, was enrolled in nursing school on a Sarah Martinez scholarship, inspired to help people even when it's difficult, just like Aunt Sarah. Tom Wynn managed the Santos Martinez Pharmacy, where no prescription was ever denied due to patient financial circumstances, and where pharmaceutical decisions were made by healthcare providers rather than insurance company bureaucrats. Carmen Santos had graduated from nursing school and worked alongside Sarah in the same ICU where this transformation had begun, carrying forward the commitment to patient care that her grandmother's crisis had sparked. Every morning at 7:00 a.m., Sarah made rounds in the hospital that bore her name and Maria's, witnessing the healthcare system she had fought to create. Patients receiving necessary medical care regardless of their ability to pay or insurance company profit calculations. Nurses empowered to make patient care decisions without corporate interference or retaliation fears. Families grateful for compassionate healthcare instead of fighting bureaucratic denials that endangered their loved ones' lives. Medical students learning that healing was fundamentally about human compassion rather than profit margin optimization. In the hospital lobby stood a bronze plaque that captured the transformation one nurse's courage had created. In memory of all patients who died because corporate policies prioritized profit over human life. In honor of all healthcare workers who chose compassion over compliance. In celebration of the moment when one nurse's $847 reminded America that every human life has infinite value. Maria Santos, 1952, and Dr. Sarah Martinez, founders. When journalists asked Sarah to summarize the impact of her decision to spend $847 on a patient's medication, she always provided the same response. I didn't change American healthcare by myself. Healthcare workers who choose patients over policies every single day, they transformed our healthcare system. I just happened to get recorded doing what nurses do every day, saving lives regardless of personal cost. The real transformation isn't that I spent $847 to save Maria Santos's life. The real transformation is that we created a healthcare system where no nurse will ever again have to choose between following immoral corporate policies and saving patients' lives. Now we save lives first and let accountants figure out the billing afterward, instead of letting accountants decide which lives are worth saving. Maria Santos, still healthy and vibrant at 73, always added her perspective on their shared journey that had changed history. Sarah Martinez didn't just save my physical heart with her courage and her $847. She saved the moral heart of healthcare itself by refusing to accept that corporate profits should matter more than human lives. She showed America that ordinary people can accomplish extraordinary transformations when they refuse to accept that immoral systems are unchangeable. The story that began with a nurse spending her last $891 to save a patient's life had become the foundation for a healthcare system where compassion guided policy, where patient needs determined priorities, and where healthcare workers were honored rather than punished for saving lives. Maria Santos was alive and thriving because Sarah Martinez had chosen courage over compliance. America was healthier because one nurse had refused to let a patient die for corporate profit margins. The 10 black cars that had arrived to support Sarah had been just the beginning of a transformation that proved individual courage could reshape institutional cruelty when ordinary people decided that human lives mattered more than corporate policies. Sarah Martinez had spent $847 to save one life and ended up saving the moral foundation of American healthcare itself.